Hi gang, as you can see we're in Bishop Lynch's office to talk to him about our project. Bishop Lynch, I'm still getting questions about how you are doing, so why don't we start there? How are you?
Unfortunately, I think I'm too well. The demands are increasing and probably working harder than I did before surgery, and that's the bad news. The good news is that with the weight loss and everything, I have a lot more energy, so I'm doing great.
Great. When we started this project, we were asked to submit plans, etc., to something called DECLA, the Diocesan Committee on Liturgical Art, Architecture, and Environment. I understand that you were the person who put that together in your time since you've been here. Could you tell us a little bit about why that group exists and what they do?
Well, almost every diocese and every bishop has a group of liturgical advisors to both look at and review drawings and plans for new churches, new worship spaces, and remodeled worship spaces, which is what we're dealing with at Holy Family. We do this for a couple of reasons. Number one, to see that the plans fit comfortably within the context and framework of the Universal Church's rules and regulations for that, for new buildings, new worship spaces, and remodeled worship spaces. And secondly, and maybe this is the most important one of all, to see that what's put there is likely to have permanent value. Now, by permanent in the church, I don't mean eternal, since nothing lasts eternally. But what we want to try to avoid in the future is a new pastor comes in, he doesn't like where the baptismal font is, he rips it out, puts it someplace else. Well, what we're doing is making sure that the baptismal font is placed now according to the documents and thinking of the church that reflects our theology and not just necessarily one pastor's opinion. Same thing could be said true for the tabernacle as well. We follow church rules and regulations for the placement of tabernacles. So DECLA, which you were happy enough to spell out because I'm not sure I could exactly what each one of those initials means, is my advisory group. In the long run, I make the final decisions. They advise that the projected project is within conformity with all of the rules and regulations that we have, and then we go ahead.
Many of the people watching this may know that your house is actually within the parish boundaries of Holy Family.
That's very true. It's my parish. Except the cathedral's my parish, folks, at the cathedral.
You were over and looking at the construction last week. Before we began, you had some specific suggestions for Father Tapp for Holy Family. Could you go over what those were?
Well, I'm not sure I would call them suggestions. He doesn't need any help from me. He's incredibly gifted and also very up to date on the mind of the church on these things and has studied liturgical architecture, so he doesn't really need any help. But comments that I made about your old church, let's put them that way. Dark, sanctuary abysmally small, allowing very few things to be done there. Principal focal points, altar and ambo, where the gospel is read from and the readings are proclaimed, woefully inadequate. It was as if they ran out of money when they built the church and weren't able to put things in that I think are worthy of the table of sacrifice and also the table of the word.
We have our dedication on December 11th, and you will be there to bless our new altar. Can you go over a little bit of what that ceremony is like and maybe the theology of the dedication of a new altar?
Well, in any church, it is the altar that is the most important place, for that's where the sacrifice of Calvary is reenacted every time Mass is offered. Now, unfortunately, in the United States, sometimes, and in some schools, it's the tabernacle, which takes on larger-than-life proportions. The tabernacle grew up, it was not a part of the early church, it grew up as the church grew and realized the necessity to somewhere store the Eucharist for emergencies, needs, and eventually for private adoration and prayer. It didn't start that way. Christians gathered around the altar, and the altar was the centerpiece, and the altar was the most important. We consecrate altars. We do not consecrate tabernacles. We do not consecrate baptismal fonts. We consecrate altars. We put the chrism, which is the finest, richest, best oil that the church possesses, that is consecrated itself at the chrism Mass during Holy Week. we consecrate an altar, we cover it with chrism, declaring that from this time on, this is a holy place where God will reside for however long the Eucharistic celebration lasts, especially the Eucharistic portion of the Mass.
Well, usually the bishop's office is not a place where deacons want to be, but we've had a great time today. Thank you very much, Bishop Lynch.
You're very welcome, Peter.